community, Bible study, going to church, being in the Shafey house was huge for me. I think, in particular, I was a new Christian at that time. I came to Christ my first year of med school, and that was just a real big deal for me to be around um, brothers and sisters that have been walking that walk and are serious about their walk. Uh, just made all the difference. And I think studying as well. I mean, you're not going through it alone. I mean, you're kind of in this mode where it's my score, and this is, this has implications for my life. And I think you can kind of box yourself in and just, kind of put your nose to the books and forget that you're not going through it alone. So I think it's helpful to be praying for others. Kind of take that focus off yourself a little bit. Remember that others are praying for you, and let your brothers and sisters there, let them know that you're thinking about them, praying for them, and I'm sure they would encourage you in the same fashion.
I liked third year a lot more than first and second year, but it was still a bit hectic. And when it comes to visiting rotations and everything, it's hectic as well. It's the first time in medical school where you're really starting to turn in long hours, and that also comes with arranging your priorities. In first and second year, you really have all the time and that can possibly be given to you, and your main goal is to pass a test. But third and fourth year, you are required to be places for a large majority of your time, and you have similar expectations in performance evaluations and things. So it forces you to prioritize, which is basically what the rest of your life will be like. And you just, in God's grace, make a decision to put Him first during that time. Will allow Him to work in your life and show you what He wants you to do with your medical career.
Third year, I grew a ton because I am a people pleaser. I think that's a common trait amongst people. That's I like to please people. I like people to be happy with me. And so third year can be challenging for someone with that specific trait, just because you're being evaluated and you've got people watching you and looking at you and making assessments and judgments about your grade and your score, and it just feels like a lot of pressure. And so I had to grow a ton just to remember that I'm not of the world. I'm not trying to please the world. That's not what I want to do or who I am. I am a child of God, and I'm only held accountable to my personal Savior. And so learning how to go each day, to step into the clinics, to step into the hospitals, or into the OR, wherever I was, and have a sense of confidence and a sense of like, I'm Lauren and I can do this kind of thing. I had to step into each of those areas, sort of surrounded by the Spirit. And so I think that I was able to grow a lot spiritually third year, because I a lot of times really struggled with just appearance and sort of worldly validation, and having to struggle through those things was really difficult, but I also think really, really important for me, just as a doctor going forward, to be able to sort of think about situations and pray about them and make decisions that are pleasing to God and that are in sort of the vein of seeking first the kingdom and not of making someone happy.
So third year, still up to this point, even having been through intern year and a couple years of residency, third year medical school is certainly one of the most trying times, just because what you do versus what you feel prepared for is so disparate. And I think that really just leads to stress. The stress is the main thing that's going to get you during third year. It's not the amount of work, though it seems like a lot. It's stressing about being evaluated every second year in the hospital. It's stressing about shelf exams, stressing about letters of recommendation, stressing about deciding what you're going to do with your life. So I think it's important to realize and acknowledge that ahead of time, and be able to basically combat that effectively. And I think the way to do that is through community. If you're involved in MCO, you know what an amazing community it's been up to this point, and it's important to realize that that community is even more important this year. Again, similar to the step one study habits, it's going to take some commitment ahead of time to make sure that you do the things that keep you in community. On rotations where you're only able to have one day off a week, you try to make that day Sunday. When you are planning on going to Bible study, going to church, know that the other days you'll use those days to study for the shelf exam, prepare for the next day, and that you'll be able to take some time off during Sunday, during your Bible study time, and again, just plan to do that. Despite all the stress of being a third-year medical student, it's important to realize that you're there to learn. You're not there as a vital working part of the team, and so if you're on a good team with good residents, they recognize that, they remember what it's like to be a med student, and they will let you do your work, and then they will try to get you out of there. The number one rule of being a third-year medical student is that when an intern or resident tells you to go home, you drop everything you're doing and leave, because they've got it under control. If they're telling you to leave, they're probably happy with the work that you've put into that point. And I think being a good third-year medical student is less about being around for a long period of time, but just working hard when you're there. And, it's okay to ask, is there anything else to do, with sort of the thought that if not, that you can feel free to go home. Managing your time well like that will allow you to stick to commitments that you've made, like going to church on Sunday, going to Bible study, and just daily staying in the Word. Hopefully you've developed habits up to this point. If it means getting up at 3:50 in the morning as opposed to 4 in the morning to get to your surgery rotation on time, that amount of time isn't going to be that big a difference. If you really want to, you can go to bed a few minutes earlier, but it'll be worth it to be in the Word and study at times when you've made the time to study, and then feel okay taking time off to go to church, to go to Bible study on the times that you've designated. The worst thing in the world is to just veg when you feel like it, and then on the times when you should be relaxing and going to church and being in fellowship, then you feel like you have to study then. So just make a commitment and stick to it. It's easier than it looks.
I grew in that I continue to learn to trust in God. And one of the verses that I kept in mind during third year was to commit your ways to the Lord, trust also in Him, and He will make your paths plain or straight. And of course that's easier said than done, but I definitely grew, and toward the beginning of the year I know that I definitely tried to depend on myself a lot, asked my friends and parents for advice before turning to God, just in terms of like choosing a specialty, studying for the different tests, choosing where to apply. But definitely toward the end of the year, I was beginning to turn to God first when I came across any obstacles, and He definitely made my way straight and plain.
Looking forward to third year, one of the big analogies that always stood out to me was you go from being a young fish on the far outskirts of a river to being thrust into the middle where the current is much, much stronger. And the current of medical school is self-sufficiency, it's acquisition and achievement, power, control. Get as much comfort, as much acclaim as you can, and those are the things that are going to make you happy. And ultimately, those are, ironically, a sad, impossible to achieve goal. They are empty and hollow,
and they are never ending. No matter how hard you work, no matter how good you are, no matter how many papers you publish, there's always going to be somebody with more. And the only thing that can truly satisfy those desires is a relationship with Christ, because it transforms everything that we do. And it assures us that as hard as we try, our trying is never going to get us there. And more than that, Christ has already gotten us there. And there's freedom in that. There is real freedom in that.
So I grew incredibly during third year. About halfway through third year was a point where God showed me that I had areas in my life that I was totally not yielding to Him. And He softened my heart and really changed my heart and helped me to be sold out for Him, essentially. And after that, I, made it a point to regularly attend church, and that's so important. I think, we were tempted to, not like, you feel like you don't have enough time, but that's not wasted time. Is going and physically being in church and being with a body of believers. That's absolutely something that's needed for growth, and God will bless that time every time. Community was a little difficult. I was traveling around a lot for my rotations. I was doing a bunch of different campuses and stuff, so it was a little tough, but I think that that would definitely be nice if you have the ability to have other Christians around you who are going through the same thing. That's awesome.
Again, just spending time with the Lord, taking time in community and going to church and still being around fellow believers is so important. Oftentimes God calls you to give up the thing that you are holding on to the most. And I think for a lot of people it's money. For other people it may be power or pride or whatever other things. But for medical students it's often time. And I think time is the one thing that you don't have a lot of and that you really want to hold on to, especially during step one. But God oftentimes calls us again to give up the thing that we are holding on to the most. And I think taking that time in the morning and taking that time during the week to spend with fellow believers and be encouraged and be uplifted is so important during this time. And it is really an amazing way to stand out among your classmates as a believer, because they're going to see it. You're really a credit to the Lord and not me, is that I wouldn't do anything differently. It was really a faith walk for me, and I really grew in my time of studying for step one and making all those decisions third and fourth year that I had to make, because it was a time that God called me to be very intentional, and I have no regrets with that. And I don't think I've ever had any regrets in my life following the Lord. And any time I was walking by faith, I have no regrets in that. And that's a beautiful thing to have no regrets and follow the Lord. I know several people that have regrets about how they handled step one, or about how they made their decision for residency or whatever else it may be, because they weren't following the Lord. And I think when you get to those moments where you gave so much up and you look around and you have nothing, I think you start to regret, why did I make these decisions? If your answer is not because the Lord called me to, or because I was following God and that I was following Christ and Christ was telling me to do this, Christ was leading me in this, then you're going to fall on empty things. But if you picked a place and you hit some hard times, which you will, you're going to hit hard times. If you follow the Lord there, you will always have that to fall back on, and He certainly will not leave you alone in that.